Hello. My name is Sigita Struberga. I am Secretary General of Latvian Transatlantic Organization, and today we have a very interesting discussion with no more interesting and I would say prominent guest from Moldova, Victoria Roșa, who is foreign affairs and security expert. And hello, thank you for being with us.
Hello, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
This interview is an important part of Riga conference follow-up interviews, which we are glad to share with Riga conference community. And I would like to start this interview with congratulations. Since Moldova is celebrating 30 years of independence.
That's right.
And as we remember, President was joining the celebration together with closest neighbors and I would say friends, Poland, Romania and Ukraine. And it was a real celebration of the independence from Soviet rule. Those countries are indeed friends and close neighbors, but at the same time they have very different destinies. We know that Romania is part of EU, the same with Poland. At the same time, you have very close ethnical and other type of ties with Romania. Ukraine has made a very hard choice and still fighting for its choice. And then there is Moldova, which is facing really challenging geopolitical and economic times at the moment. And in addition, Moldova has placed that it has multivectoral foreign policy and kind of permanently balancing between East in a way and West. And we now see that there is pro-Western president. And at the same time, those pro-Russian forces are pretty strong still. So I would like to ask, what is the direction which Moldovan political establishment will move in next few years, from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. This is a very important question for the Republic of Moldova, but I must say that after 30 years of independence, now we have a president, we have a parliament, and we have a government which very clearly stated that our foreign policy direction is towards the European Union. And this is actually very important for the Republic of Moldova because European Union means practically the modernization of the country. It means rule of law, it means anti-corruption, and practically it means an institutional development, but also an civilizational choice that Republic of Moldova has. You mentioned very well the fact that we do have a neighbor, Romania, which is very close to our heart, having cultural ties which are unbreakable, and which actually is one of the supporters of the European choice of the Republic of Moldova. And at the same time, this shows that we are at the border of the European Union, and this is why for us the choice of joining EU is one which is existential in first place. Also, what I wanted to mention is the fact that indeed you said about the presence of the presidents of the Friends of Moldova at the 30th anniversary of the Republic of Moldova, and for us this was a very important moment because then actually we saw that we have close friends which are beside us, which support our choice, our main foreign policy, but also domestic choice of joining the European Union and becoming closer to the European Union. And having also Ukraine beside meant a lot because actually Republic of Moldova and Ukraine face very similar challenges. And for us, it was very important to show that there is a common voice, a voice which would like to practically use their sovereign choice of saying in which direction the country should follow. And it's a great pleasure to see now that in the Republic of Moldova we have all the powers united and saying in the same voice that they would like and they are supporting and they are contributing and doing everything possible for Moldova to be closer to the European Union and to be closer politically, but also economically, but also culturally as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Since there is this very pro-European course on the top of the leadership, but still the situation is not that optimistic when we look on popular opinion in Moldova. So there is certain paradox that this European integration direction is not supported so much as political elite is moving to. Do you think is it going to be a serious challenge for leadership to work with this popular opinion and the Kremlin influence, which still is in Moldova?
Well, you have mentioned very correctly that we have on one hand people who are voting for a political class, and in the case of Moldova they have voted for a pro-European political class, and at the same time not necessarily all of them are supporting the pro-European choice that this political class is promoting. I would say that why this is important, because a few years ago, if we are thinking about previous electoral campaigns, we saw that the geopolitical vote was the one decisive. It was not the case now. Now people voted for that political elite, for that leader who they trusted and who they believed that could bring them welfare, a welfare state, a state which would be without corruption, a state that will give them the possibility to live in good conditions, to have a better way of life, justice, first of all, rule of law, and of course to have many possibilities to develop economically. And this is very important because this shows the fact that people do not think in geopolitical terms anymore, and you cannot manipulate them with geopolitical instruments anymore. But at the same time, I have to mention that indeed the current political elite, the current institutions, the current leaders, they do have a very big popularity. But when you are talking about modernization, when you are talking about de-oligarchization of the state, decapturing of the state, that means that you have to maintain this popularity, because you will need to make reforms which will not be very popular and that would affect a lot of people. And the question is how the current political leaders, how the current elite will manage to do that, will manage to maintain popularity and at the same time do these very painful reforms. But definitely it is understandable that Moldova cannot go on without undertaking this reform. And this is already happening in Moldova. In order to do reforms, for these reforms to be viable, you have definitely to fight against corruption. You have to put in prison corrupted people. And at the same time, you have to strive to maintain the popularity at home. So you definitely have to fight two battles at once.
Indeed, and in this sense, exactly, your neighbors, Ukraine's example is very useful in this case, since we can see that exactly those painful reforms made people to be not so pro-European anymore, not so much about European values, since exactly these painful reforms, anti-corruption measures hit them pretty much. And of course, there is a question how to leave the popularity of government. But I would like to turn to Eastern Partnership issue. As we know, Eastern Partnership itself, it has not only external challenges at the moment, but also internal ones. And it is a question about the sustainability of this format of cooperation of European Union. And I would like to ask, what does this format means for Moldova at the moment? And what are the main challenges and opportunities Moldova is facing? And what are, at the moment, in context of this format, and what are maybe expectations regarding cooperation with European Union, whether this format should be kept alive still, or still we need to find other ways or forms to cooperate in the future?
Well, yes, indeed, this is a very good question. The Eastern Partnership was a very important format for the Republic of Moldova, but also for the other countries which were involved in it. First of all, because it meant that we have a platform in which we have closer cooperation to the European Union. From the very beginning, it was said that this does not mean membership of the European Union or prospects of membership to the European Union, but at the same time it means closer ties with the European Union. I think that the Eastern Partnership has brought to Moldova, but also to the other countries, a lot of advantages. First of all, it is the relationship that we have with the European Union. I'm talking here about the association agreement, but also the DCFTA, which is included in the association agreement, the visa-free liberalization, which is absolutely an asset for the Republic of Moldova, but also the Ukraine and Georgia as well. And at the same time, I would say that it brought us closer together to our partner countries in the Eastern Partnership. Because if previously the dialogue with Georgia, with Ukraine, with Belarus, with Armenia, with Azerbaijan was not so close, now it is there. And there is also the communication between the non-governmental sector, because we have the civil society, the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. So practically it brought us together and it also showed us that we can have a common voice. And from here comes also the associated trio, and I'm very happy that actually now we can have Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine having the same voice and promoting their wishes of having closer relationship with the European Union. So I think that this is actually the advantage that the Eastern Partnership has brought to us, and this is why I think that it is a viable platform, and we have to actually acknowledge that. But at the same time, we have to mention the fact that years have passed, and now we are facing completely different challenges that we faced in 2008, 2009, when Eastern Partnership was designed. Actually, we have the 2014 events in Ukraine. We have the situation in Moldova in terms of the regional security architecture. And this is why I think that now we have to think about an upgraded Eastern Partnership, if I can say so, where we could include many other aspects. European Union does not play geopolitically, we know that. It plays institutionally. But at the same time, we have Russia, which plays geopolitically. So this is why, in our case, for our countries, it is important to find a balance between those two approaches, because definitely we need to maintain relationship with both actors. So how do we do that? How do we balance? How do we find the proper formats to cooperate and at the same time to preserve our sovereign choice, our independence and our territorial integrity, first of all? This is the question that we have to pose. And from here on, we have to think about how do we design the instruments of cooperation with the European Union and how we can upgrade the Eastern Partnership in such a way that it will reflect the needs of the associated countries, but also the interests of the European Union.
Thank you. And in this context, I would like to ask, so you mentioned this idea of balancing between two powers, one which is playing as a geopolitical actor, another one which is playing, I would say, as normative actor, right? So as I understand, you don't really believe that the European Union could have this strategic independence as it is proposed. But my question is rather whether you see that Moldova could be kind of bridge between Russia and West or East and West? Because I have heard in Moldova this kind of opinion that the best way of development for Moldova would be to be the bridge between those two, I would say, even parts of the world, or Russians would say between two civilizations.
Yeah, well, if you ask me personally, I will say that I'm not really sure that Moldova can be a bridge. This is a type of foreign policy that was promoted by the previous president of the Republic of Moldova. This was his idea of how he sees Republic of Moldova in the future. What I would say, and from where I would begin, is first of all the independence, the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Moldova. So we have to take ownership of our country, and we have to decide how we establish our foreign policy, how we cooperate with our partners, and what are our needs, and how we can ensure our needs. What I believe that it is important is to play fair, to play as equal part in communication, but also in negotiations. And I don't see a problem in communicating with the Russian Federation as well. But as I mentioned from the very beginning, we have to communicate with them, ensuring them that we would like to preserve our sovereign choice, territorial integrity and independence, and we would like to play and to communicate to them as partners, as equal partners. So I think that this is actually the message that it is put forward also by our authorities at the moment. From my perspective, I think that this is a right way to go, because if we would like to contribute and to be a global contributor, but also an European contributor as well, then we have to be a predictable partner, we have to be a fair partner, and we have to respect ourselves, but also to respect the others.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you mentioned territorial integrity, and I know how painful issue this is for Moldova. And pretty often we can observe that in West, Moldova is characterized as a country with a frozen conflict, the territory of Transnistria. At the same time, when we are observing everyday movement or interactions within Moldova, we can see that there is active, I wouldn't say networking, but still kind of internal movement between the territories. And even educational institutions are cooperating, despite the fact that in Transnistria we see that they cooperate very much with Moscow, with Russian educational system, which is partly, so Transnistrian education is partly integrated in Russian educational system. So at the same time, at 2014, at least here, there was a feeling that Transnistria, exactly because of these reasons, can be the second scenario of Crimea. And or next target for Russian aggression. And I wanted to ask whether you really see it as a frozen conflict, or maybe you would define it in another way. And my second question is, how do you see the future of this territory?
Well, first of all, I would say that I see what happened in the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova as the first scenario of the Russian Federation, because this was actually the first conflict, territorial conflict that happened, secessionist conflict, to define it properly. Maybe we cannot really associate it with what happened with Crimea, because we don't have a border with the Russian Federation. So from this perspective, we are somehow secured, because on one side we have Romania, which is a member of NATO and a member of the European Union. On the other side, we have Ukraine. So from this perspective, we are somehow secured. At the same time, we do have foreign military troops on our territory, which status becomes more and more confusing at the moment. And we do plead for the withdrawal of the Russian ammunition, but also of the Russian troops, which are not part of the peacekeeping mission in the Republic of Moldova. I would say that the conflict is protracted or frozen, as it is, as you have mentioned previously. But at the same time, I think that in the Moldovan case, in our advantage is the fact that there is no hatred between people. People are communicating, people, even though it is very difficult to travel in and out the region, but they are still doing it. So compared to other conflicts, the situation in the Republic of Moldova is easier. At the same time, I think that we as a country, our government, has to undertake more steps in bringing the left bank closer to the right bank, because there are things that we can do inside our country and does not necessarily reflect on the position of the Russian Federation. At the same time, I would mention that the role of the Russian Federation is very ambivalent, because on one hand we have Russia, who is a mediator in the 5+2 format of negotiations, and on the other hand we have Russia, which is maintaining its ammunition and troops on the territory of the Republic of Moldova in the Transnistrian region. And at the same time, they are mentioning about supporting or actually accepting our neutrality status. So From this perspective, I would say that indeed we are in a very difficult situation. We have to think about how we move forward. Do we still maintain the current format of negotiations, or we are starting to discuss another type of negotiations in order to settle the Transnistrian conflict? One thing is for sure. We as a country, we have to take the ownership and we have to do a lot more in order to bring the banks, the left and the right bank, closer together. Because on both banks, it's our people who are living, and definitely we first of all have to think about them, and after that about politics. But at the end of the day, Republic of Moldova has to come with a united vision of how we see the reunification, both politically and also financially, because it will entail costs, and we have to know how to bear these costs.
Thank you. And my final question goes to national security concept you have. And in the national security concept of Republic of Moldova, there is a number of threats mentioned, and also there is mentioned the Black Sea region as well, and NATO is also in there. So I wanted to ask, how do you see, how does Moldova perceive NATO presence in there? And again, what are expectations from NATO? What Moldovans would see how NATO can support Moldova in its very hard situation in which Moldova is, taking account Transnistria and Black Sea at the moment. So how do you see what NATO could do in this context?
Well, NATO is an important partner for the Republic of Moldova. Moldova is a member of the Partnership for Peace. And as you know, they have contributed a lot to the development of the security sector. And actually, from my perspective, they somehow started the security sector reform by assisting the authorities in the Republic of Moldova to elaborate documents, but also to have a different look at security and defense that it was previously. And I think that this is a great advantage for us to have this, this NATO support. Also, there are a lot of projects which have humanitarian side, like for example the extraction of pesticides in the Republic of Moldova, which actually helps people in the Republic of Moldova to feel safer, and this is actually very important for us. But you have mentioned very well that we have to think how NATO can help us further on. And I don't see any problems here because I don't see a problem with Moldova having the neutral status, but also cooperating with NATO in the future. And I think that this will only bring advantages to us, because Moldova finds itself in a situation, in a period when we do have to think about how to reform our security sector. And I think that NATO is one of the institutions that can help us to do that. And definitely NATO expertise is absolutely needed, but at the same time the fact that our military and also our experts can be part of the institutional, I would say, knowledge that NATO can give to us. This is very important. Myself personally, I have participated at several trainings which were done by NATO, and I found them very important because they are bringing to us many issues that we don't even think about in terms of security. For example, integrity in the security sector. Together with NATO, we started the discussion on women, peace and security. So there are a lot of issues that we can cooperate on that NATO can bring to the Republic of Moldova and contribute to the modernization and to the transformation of the security and defense sector in the Republic of Moldova. So I think that this will bring only advantages. I think that we have to enhance our cooperation with NATO. But at the same time, we have to discuss, but also communicate it to the larger public. We have to fight with the previous stereotypes that NATO is a military alliance, and to explain to our public what are the advantages of cooperating with NATO, but also with other institutions. We have to differentiate between institutional cooperation, but also geopolitical messages which are sent by political leaders, which sometimes use it to politicize a lot of issues, but also to raise political capital. So here we have to be very concrete. We have to have a very good communication strategy, and we have to keep continuously talking to our public in order to change perceptions, but also to fight stereotypes.
Yes, I just can't not ask the question regarding Russia then, since NATO still is military alliance. And as we saw, as soon Georgia started to engage with United States and NATO more, as soon as Ukraine started to engage with NATO more, we saw very sharp reaction by Russia. How do you see this balancing, and what message should be sent to Russia regarding cooperation with NATO in order to stop Russia thinking that NATO is getting closer and closer to Russian borders?
Well, NATO is considered to be an existential threat to Russia.
Absolutely.
And this we cannot ignore. We will all the time face a kind of insecurity from the part of the Russian Federation when Republic of Moldova, in our case, will continue to develop its relationship with NATO, but also with the European Union. Unfortunately, this will be there. We cannot deny it, but we have to face it. So definitely we have to construct messages, and this is why I believe that it is important to continue communicating with the Russian Federation, even though we consider it to be a difficult partner. But we have to communicate. We have to continue our partnership on those tracks that we already have them. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, we have to keep reminding the Russian Federation that we have our own sovereign choices and that we would like to be treated as equals. And if I think so, we will show Russia a little bit of predictability, or a little bit more predictability, then we could be considered as a partner, as a fair partner, with whom they could cooperate and they can communicate. I think that for Republic of Moldova, which is a small country, which is a country that needs to continue its democratic reform process, which needs to continue its modernization process, this is absolutely crucial. Mm-hmm. We have to be fair with our partners, be it in the East, be it in the West, but also to continue our choices, which is not going to be easy at all. It is going to be very hard, but communication, I think, is the most important thing, both externally, but also internally. We have to communicate to our people and to make them feel secured. This is the most important thing. I think that this was a mistake which was done in 2009, if you remember, when Republic of Moldova actually started this European path of development. At that point in time, the communication was mostly only with European partners, unless there was communication with the public at home. So this is a mistake which shouldn't repeat itself. We have to communicate to our people. We have to explain everything. And now, nowadays, as you know, it is very difficult because we have and we face different challenges which are related to elements of hybrid warfare. And this is why even more now we have to pay attention to strategic communication, and we have to be present at home with our public.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I hope we will have a chance to have another conversation regarding hybrid warfare and strategic communication.
I would love to.
This time, thank you very much. And once more, congratulations with your state's 30 years independence.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.